What happens when Hollywood's most legendary tough guy sits down for what should be a simple interview and ends up walking off set after being pushed too far by a host who just wouldn't know when to stop? In just 35 seconds of one single comment, everything fell apart, and the entire television world watched as one of the most respected figures in entertainment stood up and said, "Enough is enough." This is about respect. This is about a man who built his entire career on integrity, being treated like just another guest to poke and prod for ratings. And this is about the moment when someone finally stood up to a host who thought he could say anything to anyone without consequences. Let me take you back to that night. The studio lights are hot. The audience is packed and tight. Clint Eastwood, the man who defined cool for generations, walks onto the stage. He's older now, but he still carries himself with that same quiet confidence that made him a legend. The audience erupts. They love him. They always have. This is a man who has given the world unforgettable movies, unforgettable characters, unforgettable moments. He sits down across from Piers Morgan, and you can already feel something in the air. Something tense. Piers starts off friendly enough. He's smiling. He's complimenting Clint's career. He's talking about the movies, the awards, the legacy. Clint is gracious. He's nodding. He's giving short answers, the way he always does. He's never been one for long, flowery speeches. That's part of his charm. He lets his work speak for itself, but you can see it in his eyes. He's measuring the man across from him. He's been in this business long enough to know when someone is buttering you up before they go in for the kill. And sure enough, Piers shifts gears. He starts asking about politics. Now, Clint has never shied away from his beliefs, but he's also never been someone who uses his platform to lecture people. He believes what he believes, and he respects that others might believe differently. That's called maturity. That's called class. But Piers doesn't want a nuanced conversation. He wants a soundbite. He wants controversy. He wants to trap Clint into saying something explosive. "So Clint," Piers says, leaning forward with that smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes, "you've been very vocal about your political views over the years. Some people say you're out of touch. Some people say you represent an old America that doesn't exist anymore. What do you say to those people?" The audience shifts uncomfortably. This isn't what they came here for. They came to celebrate a legend, not watch him get ambushed. But Clint doesn't flinch. He just looks at Piers with those steely blue eyes and says, "I don't say anything to them. People are entitled to their opinions. I'm entitled to mine. That's what makes this country great." Perfect answer. Classy. Respectful. But Piers isn't satisfied. He pushes harder. "But don't you think with your influence, you have a responsibility to use your platform for good, to promote the right values?" Clint's jaw tightens just slightly. "I think I have a responsibility to be honest, to live my life with integrity. What values are right, that's for each person to decide." Now, the audience is starting to sense where this is going. There's a murmur rippling through the crowd. But Piers keeps going. He brings up specific political moments. He brings up things Clint said years ago, decades ago, twisting them, reframing them, trying to make him look bad. And through it all, Clint stays calm. He corrects the record when Piers gets facts wrong. He clarifies when Piers misrepresents his words. But you can see the frustration building behind his eyes. Then, Piers makes a mistake. A big one. He starts talking about Clint's family. "Your daughter recently made some comments that seem to contradict your political stance. Does that cause tension at home? Do you feel like maybe the younger generation is rejecting what you stand for?" The air in the room changes. You can feel it. The audience goes completely silent. Because everyone knows that Clint Eastwood is intensely private about his family. He always has been. He's protected them from the spotlight his entire career. And here's Piers Morgan, dragging them into this ambush disguised as an interview. Clint leans back in his chair. He's quiet for a moment. When he speaks, his voice is low, measured, but there's steel in it. My family is off limits. We don't agree on everything, and that's okay. That's what families do. But I don't discuss them publicly, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't either. A reasonable boundary, a clear line drawn. Any decent host would respect that and move on. But Piers Morgan is not any decent host. He actually laughs. He laughs and says, "Oh, come on, Clint. You're a public figure. Your family put themselves out there. Surely you can handle a simple question about them." The disrespect is staggering. The entitlement is breathtaking. And you can see something shift in Clint's face. He's done. He's completely done. But he gives Piers one more chance, one more opportunity to be a decent human being. "I said my family is off limits. Let's talk about something else. Or we're done here." But Piers can't help himself. Maybe it's ego. Maybe it's the cameras. Maybe he genuinely believes he's untouchable. He leans forward again and says, "I'm just trying to understand the contradictions, Clint. You present yourself as this moral authority, but your own children don't even seem to respect your views. Doesn't that bother you? Doesn't that make you question whether you're on the right side of history?" The audience gasps. Some people actually boo, because what Piers just did wasn't journalism. It wasn't even good television. It was a personal attack. It was cruel. It was designed to humiliate a man who came here in good faith. And Clint Eastwood has had enough. He stands up, slowly, deliberately. He reaches up and unclips his microphone. The studio goes dead quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Every eye in the building is on him. Piers finally seems to realize he's crossed a line because his smile falters. He tries to laugh it off. "Oh, come on, Clint. Don't be so sensitive. I'm just asking questions." But Clint isn't interested in his excuses. He places the microphone on the chair and looks directly at Piers. When he speaks, his voice is quiet, but it carries through the entire studio. "You know what your problem is? You think being rude is the same thing as being brave. You think insulting people is the same thing as being honest. But all you really are is a bully with a microphone. And I don't waste my time with bullies." The audience erupts. They're cheering. They're applauding. Because finally, someone said what everyone has been thinking for years. Piers sits there, his face red, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He tries to respond. "Now wait just a minute. You can't just walk off. We're in the middle of an interview." Clint turns back to him, and there's almost pity in his eyes. "No, you're in the middle of an interview. I'm leaving." And he walks off the stage. Just like that. No hesitation, no second thoughts. The man who stared down outlaws and westerns, who directed masterpieces, who earned the respect of generations, just walked away from a host who thought he was bigger than his guests. Piers is scrambling now. He's looking at his producers. He's looking at the audience. He tries to save face. "Well, ladies and gentlemen, I guess Clint Eastwood can't handle tough questions." But nobody's buying it. The audience isn't applauding. They're not laughing. They're just sitting there, stunned by what they witnessed. Because here's what Piers doesn't understand. There's a difference between tough questions and disrespectful questions. A tough question challenges someone's ideas. A disrespectful question attacks someone's character and family. A tough question seeks truth. A disrespect question seeks humiliation. And what Piers did wasn't journalism. It was ego. It was a desperate attempt to create a viral moment at the expense of someone else's dignity. But it backfired spectacularly. Because the moment that went viral wasn't Clint losing his cool. It was Clint maintaining his cool while setting a clear boundary and walking away when that boundary was violated. It was a masterclass in self-respect. It was a reminder that no amount of fame or platform gives someone the right to treat another human being poorly. Let's break down what really happened here, because this is important. Clint came to that interview to talk about his work. He came in good faith. He answered questions honestly. He was respectful even when the questions became pointed. But Piers had an agenda. He wanted to provoke. He wanted to push. He wanted to create drama. And when he didn't get the reaction he wanted through political questions, he went after family. He crossed a line that should never be crossed. And let's talk about that line for a second. Public figures give up a certain amount of privacy. That's part of the deal. But their families, especially when those family members aren't seeking the spotlight themselves, should be protected. They didn't choose that life. They didn't ask for their private relationships to be dissected on national television. And for Piers to drag them into it, to use them as ammunition against Clint, that wasn't just bad hosting. It was cruel. Watch how Piers frames it. He doesn't ask about Clint's beliefs. He asks about contradictions. He doesn't explore nuance. He looks for hypocrisy. He's not trying to understand. He's trying to trap. And when Clint refuses to play that game, when he sets a boundary, Piers mocks him for it. He calls him sensitive. He acts like expecting basic respect is somehow weakness. But the audience knows better. They saw a man who has nothing left to prove, nothing left to fight for in terms of his career, stand up and say no. Not for himself, really. He could have handled the political attacks all day. But for his family, for that line that should never be crossed. That takes strength. That takes conviction. And that's why the audience cheered when he walked off. Now let's talk about Piers in that moment. Watch his face when Clint stands up. There's a flash of panic, because for all his bravado, for all his confidence, he knows he pushed too far. He knows he lost control of the interview. And instead of apologizing, instead of acknowledging that he crossed a line, he doubles down. He mocks Clint for leaving. He tries to make it seem like Clint is the problem, but the audience isn't buying it. The people at home aren't buying it, because they just watched a masterclass in how not to conduct an interview. They watched a host prioritize his ego over his guest's dignity. They watched entitlement run headfirst into integrity, and integrity won. Let's talk about the words Clint used when he called Piers out. You think being rude is the same thing as being brave? That line cuts deep because it's true. There's a whole style of interviewing, of media personality, that confuses aggression with honesty. That thinks tearing people down is the same as holding them accountable. But it's not. Real accountability requires fairness. Real honesty requires respect. And what Piers did was neither fair nor respectful. You think insulting people is the same thing as being honest? Again, truth, because Piers didn't ask honest questions. He asked loaded questions. He made assumptions. He attacked. And when called out on it, he hid behind the shield of journalism. But journalism requires integrity. It requires good faith, and there was no good faith in that interview. All you really are is a bully with a microphone. This is the heart of it, because that's exactly what Piers revealed himself to be in that moment. Someone who uses his platform not to enlighten or inform, but to dominate and humiliate. And bullies only get away with it as long as people let them. The moment someone stands up to them, the moment someone refuses to play their game, they crumble. And watching Piers try to recover after Clint left was almost painful. He tried to laugh it off. He tried to make it seem like Clint was being dramatic. But the damage was done. Everyone saw what happened. Everyone saw who crossed the line. And no amount of spin could change that. Think about what it took for Clint to walk off that stage. He's from a generation where you finish what you start, where you honor your commitments, where you push through discomfort. But he also recognized that some things are more important than finishing an interview. Some principles are more important than avoiding awkwardness and protecting his family's privacy, maintaining his dignity. Those things were more important than giving Piers Morgan another 30 minutes of content. This is what standing up for yourself looks like. Not yelling, not throwing things, not creating a scene, just calmly stating your boundaries. And when those boundaries are violated, calmly enforcing consequences. Clint didn't owe Piers an explanation. He didn't owe him a second chance after multiple warnings. He simply removed himself from a situation where he was being disrespected. And that's a lesson for everyone watching. You don't have to tolerate bad behavior just because someone has a platform. You don't have to sit there and take it just because walking away might be uncomfortable. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to participate in your own disrespect. Piers tried to frame Clint leaving as weakness, as inability to handle tough questions. But anyone watching knew the truth. Walking away when you're being mistreated isn't weakness. It's strength. It's self-respect. It's recognizing your own worth and refusing to let someone else diminish it. And let's be clear about something else. Clint gave Piers multiple opportunities to course correct. He didn't storm off at the first uncomfortable question. He engaged with the political questions, even the pointed ones. He only drew a line when Piers went after his family. And even then, he gave a clear warning. He said the family was off limits. He suggested they talk about something else. He gave Piers a chance to be a decent human being. But Piers couldn't take yes for an answer. He had to push. He had to prove he was in control. He had to show that he could ask whatever he wanted. And in doing so, he lost his guest, lost the respect of his audience, and exposed himself as exactly what Clint called him, a bully with a microphone. The beauty of Clint's exit is in its simplicity. No big speech, no dramatic gestures, just unclipping the mic, placing it down, delivering one perfect line, and walking away. That's confidence. That's class. That's what it looks like when someone who truly doesn't need anything from you decides they're done giving you their time. And think about the position Piers put himself in. He brought on one of the most beloved figures in entertainment history. He had a chance to have a meaningful conversation with someone who has seen and done it all. He could have explored Clint's decades of experience. He could have asked about the craft of filmmaking. He could have delved into the evolution of Hollywood. Instead, he chose to provoke. He chose to attack. And he paid the price. Because now, instead of being remembered for a great interview with Clint Eastwood, he's remembered for the interview where Clint Eastwood walked out on him. Instead of getting insight and wisdom from a legend, he got called out on national television. And he earned every bit of it. The audience reaction tells you everything you need to know. They didn't boo Clint. They cheered him. They applauded him because they recognized what they were seeing. They were seeing someone refuse to be bullied. They were seeing someone stand up for basic human decency. And in a world where public figures often tolerate disrespect for the sake of publicity, seeing someone simply say no was powerful. This wasn't about politics. This wasn't about celebrity. This was about respect. This was about the fundamental principle that no one, no matter how big their platform, has the right to treat another person poorly. And Clint Eastwood, in his quiet, powerful way, reminded everyone of that principle. Watch how Clint carries himself as he leaves. He's not angry. He's not flustered. He's just done. There's a calmness to it that makes it even more powerful. Because when you're truly in the right, when you're truly standing on principle, you don't need to be loud about it. You just need to be clear. And Clint was crystal clear. Piers, on the other hand, is anything but calm. He's defensive. He's trying to control the narrative. He's looking for sympathy or validation from the audience and finding none. Because everyone in that room understood what happened. Everyone saw who was in the wrong. And no amount of spin could change that reality. This moment matters because it's bigger than just one interview. It's a statement about how we treat each other. It's a reminder that fame and power don't give you license to be cruel. It's proof that dignity and self-respect matter more than any amount of airtime or publicity. Clint Eastwood didn't need that interview. He didn't need the exposure. He didn't need Piers Morgan. But Piers needed Clint. He needed the ratings. He needed the credibility that comes from interviewing a legend. And he threw it all away because he couldn't help himself. He couldn't resist the urge to provoke. He couldn't respect simple, reasonable boundaries. And that's the final lesson here. When you have someone's time, someone's attention, someone's willingness to sit down and talk with you, treat it with respect. Don't abuse it. Don't take it for granted. Because the moment you do, the moment you cross that line, you lose it. And you might never get it back. Clint Eastwood walked off that stage with his dignity intact, with his principles intact, with his family's privacy protected. Piers Morgan was left sitting there, exposed and embarrassed, facing an audience that had just watched him reveal his true nature. And there's something perfectly fitting about that. Something almost poetic. The man who made his career playing tough guys, playing men of principle, showed everyone that he is exactly who he appears to be. Not an act, not a character, but someone who lives by a code and refuses to compromise it. Even when it would be easier. Even when walking away creates awkwardness. Even when staying might benefit his career. That's integrity. That's what it really looks like. Not in speeches or statements, but in actions. In moments like this, when someone is tested and they choose principle over convenience, when they choose respect over ratings, when they choose dignity over drama. And that's why this moment resonates. That's why it matters. Because we all face moments where we have to decide whether to tolerate disrespect or stand up for ourselves, whether to stay in uncomfortable situations or walk away, whether to prioritize other people's comfort or our own boundaries. And Clint Eastwood showed us what the right choice looks like. He showed us that walking away isn't giving up. It's taking control. It's refusing to participate in something that doesn't align with your values. It's recognizing that some battles aren't worth fighting because the opponent isn't worth your time. Piers wanted a fight. He wanted controversy. He wanted a moment. And he got one. Just not the one he was hoping for. Because the moment he got was one where he lost. Where he was called out. Where he was abandoned by a guest who recognized exactly what game was being played and refused to play it. And in the end, that's the most powerful statement of all. Not engaging with bad faith. Not rewarding bad behavior with your time and energy. Just calmly, confidently, walking away. That's how you win against a bully. Not by fighting them, but by refusing to be their victim. Clint Eastwood didn't need to destroy Piers Morgan with words. He didn't need to yell or argue or make a scene. He just needed to stand up, speak his truth, and walk away. And in doing so, he said everything that needed to be said. About respect, about dignity, about knowing your worth, and refusing to let anyone diminish it. That's the moment. That's the story. That's what happened when a legend met a bully and chose not to play his game. When integrity faced entitlement and won without even trying. When someone showed the world that the most powerful thing you can sometimes do is simply walk away.